I guess one of the things that he has that I don't have is I don't have to sit in the House of Representatives. And so I don't have to deal with Nancy Pelosi and David Obey. No, none of us have to anymore. But the fact is that they no longer have the majority. And without the majority in the House, they no longer have that much power. And so the situation we find ourselves in is Republicans controlling the House, the Democrats with a very fragile and nervous majority in the Senate, including probably 12 Democrats who are in very red states and extremely nervous, on top of a series of Democrats who are pretty moderate and willing to compromise, like Ron Wyden of Oregon. And then you've got a president who is a liberal but knows he needs to win back the center, knows he needs to win back independence, and is seriously within the administration talking about doing tax reform. So to me, this is not a hopeless moment. This is it's not a great moment, but it's about as good a moment as we're likely to get in real life. And the moment is to be seized to head off the disaster Paul described. To me, the prospect of national bankruptcy is worse than the prospect of some tax increases. And so if I were him in power, I would make the deal. David Cameron, the saint of David Cameron, has a budget which is probably 80% tax cuts, 80% spending cuts, 20% tax increases. And that's probably the right ratio, because we do know that tax cuts lead to long-term deficit reduction, spending cuts lead to long-term deficit reduction much more than tax increases. Nonetheless, it's probably the right ratio, maybe for policy grounds, but certainly for political grounds. And my problem with the Republican Party right now, including Paul, is that if you offered them 80-20, they'd say no. If you offered them 90-10, they'd say no. If you'd offered them 99-1, they'd say no. And that's because we've substituted governance for Groverism, for a rigidity that Ronald Reagan didn't have. And so, and to me, this rigidity comes from this polarized worldview that they're a bunch of socialists over there. You know, again, I've spent a lot of time with the president. I've spent a lot of time with the people around him. They're liberals. They have much greater faith in planning than I do. And the health care plan that came out of that, it reflected their faith in planning, that a bunch of smart guys sitting around in Washington can plan the health care system of this country. But they're not idiots, and they're not Europeans, and they don't want to be a European welfare state. They want to have, if you read what they've written for the past 20 years, a more active, planned society, which does a little more redistribution. But it's American liberalism, and it's not inflexible. And I really recommend that Georgetown speech that Obama gave. It dovetails in some ways with what you guys wrote. And so to me, I think it's a time for flexibility and a time for some sort of compromise. But a compromise built on the principle, again, that what matters is character. What matters is the character of the country. Using government in ways that instill good character and not using government in ways that instill bad character. My problem with the Great Society, I think I'm fine with the New Deal. I don't know about people in this room. I'm fine with it because I don't think Social Security, I don't think the Civilian Conservation Corps weakened character. I'm not fine with the Great Society because then you had a liberalism that began to undermine character, that began to undermine the bourgeois institutions of work, faith, and family. And so you can tell conservatives about what year they'd like to go back to. Some in the Tea Party, I think, want to go back to the founding. Some in the Claremont Institute want to go back before the progressive era and the Federal Reserve Board. Some, my friend Anna Mendy Schlaze, may want to go back before the New Deal. I want to go back to 1965 and start from there. And start with a set of policies that instill initiative and bourgeois values. And I think a lot of the poll is on the right track with most of them. The idea of giving people defined contributions in Medicare would get them engaged in their health care spending. It would get them making the sort of responsible choices that nobody has to make anymore. The policy is great. I'm in favor of charter schools for that reason. It gets people involved in responsible middle-class bourgeois decision-making. And so the policies are fine if we're willing to make do the politics needed to get there. But finally, two things which should trouble us and which make life hard. Most of us in this room are college educated. We're willing to take responsibility upon ourselves. We're willing to have a riskier life because we feel our choices will be able to handle them. But as we saw in the Social Security debate, there are a lot of people, frankly, in less educated parts of the country who do not want those choices. And Republican areas destroyed some of the Social Security reform because they live in extremely unstable, uncertain circumstances, and they didn't want more risk and more choice put upon them. And we have to be conscious of that if we want to create the opportunity society that Paul and Arthur talk about. And that's just a fact because they are fundamentally conservative. They have a tremendous faith in order and authority, which we should all respect. And then the final thing to be said is, again, I keep harping on this day after tomorrow, but I think it is a crucial debate because the reason America got rich in the 19th century was because we were the most educated country on earth. We could count on a certain level of social capital we can no longer count on. We have a widening, segmenting society because people without college degrees are getting poorer, their families are breaking down, single parenthood among all ethnic groups is on the rise. And to fix that problem, which is necessary to preserve America's greatness in the next century, is going to take some paternalistic government. Paternalistic in the sense of the KIP programs, paternalistic in the sense of the Harlem Children's Zones, because you have families fundamentally breaking down, and unless we want to sit by and let that go, we're going to have to take some action which does not square with the sort of hands-off, laissez-faire ideal. And so I think we're at a moment where we've had this big government, small government debate, and my theme of my life is to return us to the Hamiltonian, Whig, Lincoln tradition, which is not small government to enhance freedom. It's not big government to enhance equality. It's limited but energetic government to enhance social mobility. Thanks.